These are Gen Alpha toddlers and younger kids who were preemptively registered on the Verizon family plan in utero, and once they spawn in, they're eligible to receive a default kit of a drop-resistant iPad Air and a blue pair of noise-canceling headphones that actually saves the parent a few dollars because it's so cumbersome on their head that it doubles as a form of cranial remodeling therapy. Primarily through YouTube as the streaming service of choice, there's just a treasure trove of great one-dimensional stuff that usually contains a didactic, educational quality to them. Now, I remember the days where parents were concerned that inappropriate TV shows like SpongeBob or Ren and Stimpy were considered detrimental to our cognitive development, but I'm glad with the advent of modern-day content moderation that this doesn't seem to be an issue anymore. And yes, behavioral discipline has never been made easier. Now, once these children grow up in a few crucial developmental years, they will receive a phone and they're going to move on to the next step in the pipeline. From prepubescent to adolescent, we enter the second stage of this pipeline. So typically you can identify the species by the following phenotypes: the presence of one AirPod, wearing neon basketball shorts in the wintertime to prove their masculinity, wearing Adidas joggers in the summertime to cover the insecurity of their legs. Now, these specimens possess their own culture, language, and jargon that can actually get into the weeds of some fairly complicated semantics. And so regardless of their academic performance, every algorithm fiend excels in the following fields of study: number theory, business analytics, agricultural science, anthropology, and linguistics. But I digress. Pinning down an algorithm fiend's music taste is as hard as the internet is expansive. If you ask an algorithm fiend their favorite album, they might give you one of these albums, or a 7-hour loop of brown noise. From late adolescence to early adulthood, we arrive at the final stage of the pipeline. Hyperpop, vaporwave, digicore, maximalist genres are some good examples. This is music that's firing on all cylinders to fuel their already fried dopamine receptors. If you ask a chronically online music fan to name their favorite genres, they cannot describe their preferred sound or feeling without using the suffix core at the end of each genre they list. So a lot of times, often, their music profile can be described as an aesthetic vibe, which is really just code for a recycled Frank Ocean song that was slowed and reverbed. They also typically have sad boy hours playlists. They're a fan of cursive singing, and they really enjoy these obscure niche Japanese albums that mysteriously appear on everyone's For You page. But before you bash on the ignorance of algorithm fiends for not knowing older music, you have to admit that this species is contributing great strides in reviving a few seconds of a chorus of older output into the mainstream for an Instagram reel or TikTok, for example. And just to name a few artists that they might be into, I'm thinking of any of the Drain Gang boys: Jane Remover, 100 Gex, Underscores, Sophie, Charlie XCX, Death's Dynamic Stroud, Magdalena Bay, Two Hollis, and Netspend. They most likely own several cross-platform meme accounts that are actually pretty successful and doing pretty well. And if you ever want to contact these people, you're gonna have to create a Discord account first. You've already probably heard of this genre or aesthetic of a person, typically male, that will frequent brick and mortar cafes, Barnes and Nobles, hold a matcha latte in one hand and some feminist literature in the other. They will shamelessly tell you their favorite artists include Clairo, Leve, Mitski, Biba Doobie, Lana Del Rey, Taylor Swift, Billie Eilish. You can even call it Laufey and they wouldn't get mad at you. But here's the thing. This strat was exposed a long time ago and it became so mainstream that the devs already patched it. Nowadays, you have to dig a little bit deeper with the more alternative and indie cuts, but just dig a little bit deeper. Remember, we're not allowed to go too deep here. Yeah, you dug way too far. Dial it back just a little bit. Getting a little bit warmer. Okay, perfect. I'm talking about TV Girl, Alex G, Faye Webster, Cocteau Twins, The Smiths, The Marias, Adrian Lenker, Conan Gray, Ricky Montgomery, Beach Bunny, Cave Town, just to give you a starter pack, a little sampler, and just some insight on an exploit that still hasn't quite been patched yet. Cut from the same cloth into the same breed as the boy band craze with groups like One Direction, Big Time Rush, Jonas Brothers, but a bit more timely from recent years with just a bit more neuroticism. I mean, there was a point in time where this poster was hanging in every college dorm room and frat house in America. It's quite interesting how the K-pop world has its own subculture, and with that comes its own terminology. If you ask any well-versed K-pop stan to enlighten you, they will start by explaining what a debut, hiatus, comeback, B-side, company, subsidiary, or bias references. They act like they invented these words, and they're going to try to educate you on how the inner workings of the music industry operates. I will admit though, I did have to learn what a bias wrecker was, but that's just my observation. So I don't know, you can call me an anti for that one. Believe it or not, they even designate some members of the group as simply the visual, and this is exactly what you think it means. This industry is literally pumping out K-pop groups like manufactured products and dehumanizing individuals to the point where their one job in the group is to be the conventionally attractive one. Like, we were very discreet about this as a society during Beatlemania, for example, but at least he wrote the songs. I mean, they've got this boiled down to a sterile empirical science. There's even these specialized producers that exist known as topliners who have one job, and it's to write simply just the hook or the main melody that gets stuck in your head. And I wanted to remind everyone at home that, at least in my opinion, this whole K-pop craze started with very humble beginnings, and I think we can trace that beginning to 2012 with this very man. You know, there would be no K-pop demon hunters without Psy. You could argue that maybe K-pop was inevitable, but you have to admit that this man walked so that these boys could run. And has it aged the most gracefully? Actually, yes. This video is still very funny to this day. You know, sometimes you look at these lists, Spotify top monthly listeners, Billboard Hot 100 lists, and just think, who's actually listening to this stuff? Surely these streams must only come from a playlist that's on loop in the Hollister at the mall. Well, it turns out there's a real audience for these artists. You guys are in luck, because I actually found some live footage of this kind of fan. Let's show the clip. Also known as Coworker music or NPC music, this is perhaps the blandest, most safe, inoffensive music that would normally be a faint drone in the background just to barely fill up the space with ambience, but not in an interesting, textured Brian Eno way. I'm talking about artists like Imagine Dragons, AJR, Glass Animals, post-debut Maroon 5, post-Viva La Vida, Coldplay, and MGK. College, frat boy rap like Ian, NF, Jack Harlow, industry plant Nepo Baby stuff like Gracie Abrams, Somber. Nothing inherently wrong with liking these artists if you have an emotional connection to these artists' songs. You sort of just absorb the first thing that your algorithm hands you. I totally get that. And no need to be the hero either and try to introduce these people to something with a deeper substance. Just let them be happy. You know, they have enough on their plate already and enough to think about at work. And in their free time, NPCs like to either rock climb or run marathons, one or the other. These people are typically at least in their 50s, or retired folks that are floating down the lazy river with a pina colada in one hand by day and sipping strawberry daiquiris in the hot tub by night. So what exactly are these people listening to? Well, whatever's playing on the overhead speakers by the soft serve machine when they go back for seconds at the cruise ship buffet, of course. These are typically one-hit wonders that you'll hear, like Macarena by Los Del Rio, Come On Eileen by Dexy's Midnight Runners, Don't Worry Be Happy by Bobby McFerrin. You know, whatever's gonna set the vibes right or start a spontaneous, quirky little conga line. And if you're ever at a sheltered resort area, I would say you might hear anything by Bob Marley and the Wailers, Jimmy Buffett, Red Red Wine by UB40, or Ask the Dutchie by Musical Youth. You know, whatever's going to be conducive to that tropical island vibe, or whatever's going to subliminally get you to buy into that timeshare that the nice lady at the front desk is going to keep sending you landline phone calls about. But again, are any of these songs or artists necessarily bad? No. And this is the music that they're blasting on the boardwalk or at the resort or cruise ship that's playing on repeat on aux, so it's out of their hands, really. So what are these people listening to when they aren't on the shuffleboard court? Well, they're listening to real music, of course. Classic rock, dad rock, arena rock, yacht rock, soft rock, folk rock, whatever you want to call it. You know, you can't go wrong with the Mamma Mia soundtrack, some Dolly Parton, some Billy Joel, Eagles, Journey, Fleetwood Mac, Beatles, Stones, Hall & Oates, Prince, Queen, Steve Miller Band, Van Halen, Duran Duran, Guns N' Roses. You know, pretty much just any artist who participated in the We Are the World USA for Africa event. Old heads wallowing in juvenoia like to reminisce on the good old days where music had meaning, lyrics were profound, songs had guitars in them, musicians were ugly, the music charts were infallible, and SCDs were rampant. But nowadays, songwriting is lazy or non-existent even. Band phenomenons are fading, albums are disappearing. In reality, this concern is only partially rational. The reality is, if you dig just an inch beneath the surface, you'll find some pretty meaningful stuff. So just because the generation before you shoved Johann Sebastian Bach down your throat for listening to Elvis Presley or rebellious rock music doesn't mean you have to shove Elvis Presley down our throat for listening to Johann Sebastian Bach. So there's two specific genres that I'm purposefully avoiding, deathly afraid of covering, due to their polarizing fan base. So let's see if they're willing to be made fun of today. Alright, never mind, let's move on. Next are elitists or old school rap fans. These are typically older men, at least in their 40s, that grew up listening to hip hop during the peak of the late 80s to early 90s during this golden era of boom bap hip hop. Outside of this, they hold massive respect for the Soulquarians and the Native Tongues movement for using that raw hip hop sound with some smoother, soulful R&B instrumentals. And they think that all rap music that's coming out today is mumble rap garbage. They will not give any new rap song a chance if it has a single ignorant 808 or a triplet trap hi-hat flow. Old heads like to dissect complex lyrical miracle verses and try to one-up each other by parsing out increasingly obscure pop culture references and double, triple, quadruple entendres. If you ever make fun of an old school rap song's sound, they'll often use the term MC to defend the early developmental stages of the genre's roots. New school rap fans are less concerned about preserving a style or regional sound or time period. They're more interested in covering as many creative bases as possible. This includes listening to anything from experimental, alternative hip-hop, drumless hip-hop, trap, rage, drill, conscious, or backpack rap, to name a few genres. And so while old school rap fans have the late 80s to the early 90s to look back in fondness as the golden age of hip-hop, new school rap fans have 2016. Just like how the old school rap fans have the neo-soul, soulquarians to appreciate, this generation of new neo-soul and alternative R&B also exists with a lot of crossover onto the hip-hop scene. I'm thinking of artists like Frank Ocean, SZA, Sampha, Silk Sonic, FKA Twigs, Tyler the Creator, and this is where we start to see divisions in artist catalog as well that begin to divide fan bases depending on your taste, and that's most likely a product of your age. Prog fans are interesting because they're extremely snobbish about rock music with flute solos in them that's written from the perspective of a struggling, lowly commoner in the 18th century in Europe. But that's because prog fans are interested in one thing, a concept album. This is essentially the musical version of live-action roleplay, cosplay, or Saturday D&D nights. Concept albums often tell a story with one song's lore or world building carrying through onto the next, and as if that wasn't esoteric enough, the music at a theoretical level is often extremely complex, using odd instrumentation, long-winded solos, and entrancing, transcendental melodic passages. You'll hear odd time signatures, dense, archaic, symbolic lyricism, obscure references, and virtuosic playing. The hardest thing for a prog fan to do is to resist the urge to count a time signature on their fingers when showing an uninitiated prog fan an odd time signature for the first time, just to prove that they're capable of counting above the number 4 to special numbers like usually 5 or 7. So the bottom line is they need their music to be as cerebral and engaging as possible. The easiest way to rage bait a prog fan is to tell them a fun fact they may not know, like how if you start The Wizard of Oz at the same time that you start Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon, they'll mysteriously align perfectly. Definitely watches Adam Neely, plays an instrument himself, as it is arguably the only way to truly appreciate the art form's beauty and complexity. But contrary to popular belief, not all jazz heads' favorite movie is Whiplash, likely because they take issue with its disgusting misrepresentation of the jazz scene and culture, as well as the unrealistic portrayal of training and becoming a jazz musician. In reality, a jazz fan's favorite movie is La La Land because it's cute. When you think about it, jazz musicians like to recycle the same songs over and over again and just do their own rendition of it by improvising over a set of the same chords. So when you really think about it, a true jazz fan has only listened to about 11 different songs total. They're just played differently. Autumn Leaves, Night in Tunisia, My Funny Valentine, Misty, Green Dolphin Street, All the Things You Are, and The Girl from Ipanema. If you ask a jazz fan for music recommendations, you might send your way Kind of Blue, Take 5, or A Portrait in Jazz. Then, once you return to them with a PhD degree in jazz music theory and learned what a mode is, maybe, just maybe, you'll finally be able to understand Giant Steps, The Shape of Jazz to Come, or Black Saint and the Sinner Lady. And in their free time, jazz heads like to argue with others that Leve is not considered jazz music just because she uses major 7th chords in her songs. Audiophiles are typically older folks who have enough money to burn and enough money saved up to afford an entire room in their home dedicated to storing their encyclopedic record collection, with a small section dedicated to CDs, cassettes, 45s, 78s, or even 8 tracks. And they claim to hear the obvious noticeable difference between digital audio processing and analog audio, and they will almost always champion analog audio equipment, claiming that analog offers a closer, more intimate listening experience that connects you with the art, almost like the band is playing right in front of you. They often use terms that don't actually mean anything, like warm, tinny, high ends, low ends, airy, harsh, thin, and full to describe a sound. Audiophiles like to collect at least 2 copies of their favorite records, one to play in their living room and 1 mint copy to keep sealed and stored away forever because of the rare misprint on the record label, perhaps showcasing on an IKEA shelving unit, like a PSA 10 Pokemon card that their future progeny can inherit. The easiest way to rage bait a record collector is to use this slur in front of them, make a lazy frisbee dinner plate joke, touch the grooves of their records. Maybe you can gift them a VG Plus grade Barbra Streisand album, or tell them that their own record collection inspired you to buy a suitcase record player for themselves. They will never buy a monthly streaming service subscription because vinyl is significantly more affordable, but they will greatly splurge once a month on a $500 cartridge or blow $1,000 on a new pair of passive speakers that will require a $400 power amp to use, which will then require another $800. The Critic is possibly the most insufferable stereotype of music fan because they will actively try to indoctrinate and influence your music taste in a passive-aggressive way. If a single from your favorite album lands anywhere on the Billboard Top 100, I actually found some footage of this kind of fan. Take a look. And after doing some cursory research on only the most reliable music publications, they seem to embody an elitist, condescending perspective on what objectively the best music is, when in reality their favorite albums are actually just the MU core essentials. But don't ever go band for band with their obscure music taste, because they will hop off trends faster than you can say Topsters 3. And speaking of Topsters, critics like to compile pretentious Topsters, madness brackets, and tier lists of their favorite albums in their downtime just to pick fights with other Redditors on r/Fantano forever. Critics feel a sense of fulfillment when someone over the age of 35 tells them that they were born in the wrong generation, and their favorite time of year is the end of November when Spotify Wrapped comes out, and they can proudly showcase on their Instagram story that they're in the top 0.1% of Tyler the Creator listeners. Now, after these formative developmental years, some critics will often mature into the next stage of their metamorphic music fan journey. And that leads us to the next stereotype. This is the music nerd. Music nerds have long strayed away from their critic phase of pretentious hot takes and opinions and have graduated into being extremely based, sensible individuals. They've listened to pretty much anything and everything under the sun, and they're the only people in society who are truly allowed to use the word eclectic or niche to describe their taste. The reason being is that their ears have become so desensitized and jaded that they actually make the full loop of pretentious music critic taste back to the acceptance of quote normie music. You see, they've traveled the whole gauntlet and are so secure and comfortable with themselves that they'll actually enjoy an Olivia Rodrigo song here and there. Music nerds will not lash out at you or try to correct you when you tell them that Taylor Swift just released Album of the Year or that Travis Scott is on their rap Mount Rushmore. Those days are long past them, and they don't fall for these rage bait tactics any longer. Music nerds can still be a fan of Anthony Fantana, but all they need is the first sentence of the description to know what score he's going to give the album. They don't need to actually scroll down to the very bottom. Music nerds like to watch heady, intellectual, stimulating YouTube content. YouTubers like Deep Cuts for a more profound, robust description of musical textures and a historical background in and influence the artist had on the music scene or movement it was connected to or even born out of. Or Professor Sky if they want an in-depth literary or philosophical analysis of the major themes of the newest Black Country New Road album, for example. Music nerds have watched every Nardwuar Video Vault interview, every NPR Tiny Desk concert, every KEXP performance, every Hot 97 freestyle, every Double XL Freshman Cypher, every Kenny Beats the Cave episode, every Polyphonic, Volksgeist, Middle 8 video essay, every Adam Neely analysis, 12-tone analysis, David Bennett music theory analysis, and every Charles Cornell theory breakdown. They've also listened to every podcast, seen every documentary, biopic, and probably have strong feelings about it as well. So if you're ever in a public setting with a music nerd, you won't ever need Shazam. They themselves are a walking Shazam Shazam that can even recognize the original samples of a song you may be listening to, and you can leave it up to them to explain any genre tag, whether it be by chronology, region, or even onomatopoeia terms. An up-and-coming producer's DAW or digital audio workstation of choice is usually Ableton or FL Studio, and when it comes time to mix and master their track or record with collaborators, they will stay on their DAW because they're secretly too scared to learn how to use Pro Tools. If you ever tell a producer that sampling is lazy or a form of stealing or plagiarism, they will without fail show you this tracklib sample breakdown of Daft Punk's Face to Face. Producers are notoriously hard to reach because they'll tell you that they're cooking in the stew and too busy to talk, but if you actually manage to catch a producer in the wild or in a public setting, they are most likely shamefully using Shazam to figure out what song is playing in the mall food court to use as a sample in their next track. Now, you may be thinking, how can a producer who's just a kid afford this lofty studio equipment? Well, it turns out all you need is a laptop, Scarlett Solo audio interface, and either an Akai MPK Mini or an Arturia Minilab MK2. If a producer is ever vulnerable enough to show you their 4-bar loop that they've been working on, and you say that it feels like it's off time or off tempo, even just a little bit, they will angrily explain to you that they're trying to achieve a fluid, off-the-grid, unquantized feel to get a more natural hi-hat groove, and they will tell you to go and listen to J Dilla Donuts before ever questioning their musical authority ever again. A producer's biggest fear is actually this anime girl keygen jump scare that pops up whenever they launch their cracked Omnisphere plugin, and if you ever catch a producer in the studio, they often have reruns of Tom and Jerry or some random Looney Tunes cartoon playing on their second monitor for some reason, and when taking a break from producing or making beats, they will pull up either a Nick Mira video or a mini documentary on the making of Astroworld just to remind them that it's all gonna be worth it once they make it out of the hood. The hood, of course, being a 4-bedroom, 3-bath, single-family home in the suburbs. Those are all the ones I can think of. Let me know of any ones that I missed, and maybe I'll make a part 2, including all your suggestions to offend even more people. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.